I want to show you my personal terminal setup and configuration in this video. And the reason I want to do that is to show you in practice what an automation mindset looks like. I've talked about the automation mindset in one of my earliest videos, but I've never really shown any examples on the screen. And I'll be sharing screen with my terminal and my IDE for most of this video, so I can really show you what I've built over the years. Let's get into it. First, let's quickly recap what the automation mindset is. It is the act of identifying repetitive or mindless tasks and then reducing friction for them. Especially those types of tasks that are lots of typing, clicking, or tasks where you don't need to think that much anymore to execute them. You're just doing them because you do them always in this specific way. And then start automating. Start writing scripts for them. Not only because you'll be faster, but because your job will be more fun. You'll have less of those things that you just need to do and not think. No, you'll have more things that you'll actually enjoy. The goal is to reduce friction, to reduce the number of things that drain you, that make your job less fun. The first example I want to take a look at is setting up a new MacBook. Now, this doesn't happen to me that often, so it's not really a time saver. I'm not setting up new MacBooks daily, even if it happens once a year. There's still reasons for me to want to automate some parts of it, and there's still reasons for me to script some parts of it. Because, for example, consistency. I would like my Visual Studio Code, whether it's my private laptop, my work laptop, or it doesn't matter. I want it to be equal, because that way I can remember the shortcuts, get really fast with it, and I don't have to have so much context switches, which is cognitive load and annoyances. And if I have this consistency of my terminal, my editor, my shortcuts, all my setup, then I'll be a happier person. I've scripted the way I set up a new MacBook. Now, I haven't created a script for a computer to execute. It is a set of notes that I run through myself. I did this because this script exists, again, not as a time saver, but as a way to create consistency. I could script this probably in a terminal if macOS would allow all these kind of settings to be scripted in a terminal. I don't know. I haven't really spent that time, and that's not really the point here either. Again, this is about consistency. So every time I set up a new Mac, I remove Siri from the touch bar because I don't use Siri. I turn off these settings that I don't like, the double space yields a dot. There's other things there. I have these apps that I install. When I install iTerm 2 as one of the first things, I want to add natural text editing as one of the settings so that I can use my option arrow keys and what to jump words in the terminal, and that really feels good to me. I've experienced this in Linux before. I want to have that in Mac as well. I use Homebrew as a package manager. I'm switching from ZSH to Bash. So I want to have a newer Bash because Mac has a very old Bash because of some license stuff that has been going on. I've written these steps here very clearly because I've noticed in the past that when I started searching for this, I always ended up with different blog articles and slightly different steps. And now I've done the research once. This is it. I just need to run these commands. I don't need to think about it anymore. Don't need to spend time anymore. Restart. I want a newer Git because Mac ships with a very old Git by default. I use this password manager. Slack. Need to set dark mode because it's a local setting. Then there's these apps. I use Rectangle as a window manager, keeping you awake. Background music if I want to change the volume control per app or go to left or right of my ear because I'm doing two things at the same time. These are the commands to install them. I can just paste that and run and done. Then I want to add all of these to my login items. As my dot files, I'll explain those in a bit. My VS Code setup. These are the extensions that I'm using. I'm using a symlinked settings.json, so my settings.json is versioned. This is my dot files, which again I'll explain in a bit. It saves me from having to remember all this in a very exact way because I know that I want these specific commands. I'll just have to look them up every time, and that will cost me a lot of time. And the time is not the issue here because I only do this once a year or even less. The frustration is, and the mindlessness of that is the issue. And that's what I fixed with this script. And now within half an hour, this MacBook's ready to go. And that is really fast. So it also turned out to be a time saver. Now, one of the things I do want to zoom into is my dot files. So dot files are files that start with a dot in the name, and they're configuration files for many different things. Bash has a lot of them. I use Bash, and I've actually scripted the part of the setting up a new machine. I've scripted that in a Bash script. So I have this command that I can just run, bit.ly/Bronneman.files, and then this bash file will be downloaded. I will just run it, and then I'll have my prompt. I have my bash settings. I'll have all kinds of things. So what is this? I have a Git repo, and this Git repo contains this command to run it. There's literally a script in here that is the setup.files.bash, and this script runs through all kinds of things. It will check, is Git available? Do you have an apt-get available? Then I can just install Git for you. It will clone the .files, this repo, and then it will run through all of these files to sync, because my bash configuration is in here, my aliases, my prompt are in there. I've got Emacs, my Git configuration, my Git ignore, Git completion, all kinds of other things that I want to be equal on every machine, whether it's a Linux machine or a Mac OS, doesn't really matter. I want them to be equal because it's just my Git settings. I would like my Git and my bash aliases to be equal across all machines. Then, because whether it's a work machine or a private machine or whatever, I need to enter my full name. It turns out that this script is also being used by other people nowadays. So, okay, I needed to script entering your current name, because that's different if you're a different person, of course. And these files that it will symlink, it will literally just create, for example, this is my prompt. It's a very large bash script. If I go to my terminal, there's a folder, .files, and in this folder I have a whole bunch of files. So I have my .files in here, bash aliases, bash profile, bash prompt. This is literally the file, the folder that was cloned, the Git repo. But if I go one folder up, then you'll see that these files, like my bash profile, is a symlink to the .files repo, bash profile. And I do this so that I always have this versioned. If I update on one machine, if I come up with a new alias, it doesn't really matter, want to add an alias to it, then I can quickly push that to the Git repo, and I can pull it on this repo, and then bam, there we go. I'm in sync again. My settings are in sync, because in this I can just run Git commands. I can just download it. So I've modified this. I'll explain this in a bit. Let's zoom into my bash settings. I've got a whole bunch of aliases that made it easy for me to work with this stuff. The ones that I use most are the L instead of ls, and ll if I want to also show the .files. Those are things that I use a lot. The cd 1 or 2.5 folders back. If I'm in the .files folder and I'm then also in the scripts folder, then cd2 and I'm back. I use kubectl, use Kubernetes a lot, both personally and for my work. So these are things that I like as well, so that I can easily switch different configurations and different kube configs to different environments. I can always get the status of my current Kubernetes connection, so that I have this available. I also created some aliases for that. It's just a whole bunch of commands with some arguments that I don't want to remember typing all of that. That's just going to make me very crazy. So path tree, I want my tree command to be without a .git and without node modules, because that'll again drive me crazy if I want to. So yes, there's a node modules in there. I don't even want to look at it. This is the files that are there. So when I move to the source of that, I have a bash aliases file, which literally specifies these things. I noticed at some point when I started using both Mac OS and Linux that Mac has a Unix ls command, and therefore it supports different things. So I am detecting whether I'm on Mac OS, whether I'm on a Darwin kernel, then I'm assuming the Unix version of the ls. And when I'm on Linux, I can have a specific time style directories, and that I can also specify to be sorted in a specific way, because this is the new version of ls. When I'm on Darwin, sometimes I have different things that I want to do. I have these if simply available, so that I can easily share these scripts. Aliases are fairly simple thing, fairly simple feature to start adding. In my profile and my bash rc, I have different variables that I want to turn on, environment variables. So my bash rc is simply an execute all these other scripts. Turn on the node version manager, which I use as well. and my dot profile is a whole bunch of environment variables that I want to be executed. So my editor is Emacs. If I need to write a commit message in the terminal, then this is the way I want the commit message to pop up in editor for me. I want the no window version of Emacs so that yeah, it boots up quicker and I can immediately start typing. I want a less command, want it to be UTF-8 by default. It isn't. Then there's all kinds of other things, like if I have a .bin folder or a local .bin folder, which is Linux specific things, then I want these to be added to my path so that I can create my own executables, but software that is installed for my user alone, so it's in my home folder. Linux brew and homebrew need to be run. Every time I start up a terminal, there needs to be some environment variables available for that. I use Rust and other things as well, so that I want these environment variables to be available so that cargo works by default. Now, as you may have seen already, I've got a very specific prompt which consists of multiple parts. So my prompt, bash prompt file has a git function, a node function, and a Kubernetes function, and it has all kinds of colors, and it will set them in a specific style. So it's a multi-line prompt. So if I look here, it has my username, and it can be root as well, or some other user if I'm SSH'd into another machine. This is the machine I'm currently at, this is the folder I'm currently at, and this is a git directory because it has a .git folder in there or in one of its parents, and I'm on this branch currently. So there's no other branches, I believe, but if I would be on another branch, fix temporary branch, then it would show me. There's also the exclamation mark here that states that this is a not clean working directory because I have modified the VS Code settings JSON. And with my alias, like git d, it's the same as git diff, and this shows me that I've updated the zoom level, but I haven't committed that thing. That simply has to do with the fact that I'm recording here, and I wanted the font to be somewhat bigger so it's easier to read on the YouTube video. If I decrease it and then I now look again at the working directory, it's clean, because every time I update my setting in VS Code, then let's zoom in twice. Now I have zoom level 2. It's literally that fast. If I want to update something, the file itself is being edited. The file itself through the symlink is being updated. So I can just commit that. I can just git add, git commit, git push, and it's in the version that I want to have on other computers as well. So as you've seen already, I have a lot of aliases in Git as well. Let me go through them in the, let me make this a bit smaller again, git config. So in here, there's all kinds of settings. Again, I want to be this default push model. I want the default branch to be main. I want to be rebasing by default as my strategy. And the commands that I used, like S, it's the same as git status. So B for show me all the branches. So I could literally do git L and it would show me the commits in a specific way. Again, my terminal is quite small here, but usually this would be a single line and would be a bit better in terms of readability. I want the commits for all the branches. There's all kinds of commands that are that I use a lot. Like I use this specific IC diff tool because it's a very easy terminal diff tool that it works a lot better if you have than if you have it side by side. If you need to read these things side by side, it's just a more human way of reading things. I use the squash tool a lot. I want to always use fetch with these kind of arguments. When I do pool, I want by default want it to be a rebase pool. I want to be able to easily purge different branches that are merged so that every time I run my git update command, I'm not, these old branches are not sticking around accidentally. Again, all kinds of settings that you might want to have that are nice to work with. And the point here is that it makes me a lot faster. It just hard codes all the defaults that I don't want to think about anymore. The things I will start forgetting if I have to type them out every time. And now I won't. Now I won't make these basic mistakes. Now I can just forget about it and use my mind for other things, for more important things. Another thing I wanted to show is a script I have for running updates. just updates on packages and your OS and whatever's going on. There's so many different package managers out there, and there's differences between Linux and Mac OS, and all of these have slightly different requirements, and keeping all of it up to date in a way that is sustainable. So if you want to run run all updates command every day or every other day or whatever on your machine, and you want to keep doing that for years in a row, then at some point you start accumulating temporary files. I wanted my script to also start deleting those things, so my machine keeps being clean as possible. So I've got this script that I have literally just called updates. It's a bash script, and it starts to detect what type of OS you have and then run different things. It starts to figure out which package managers you have available. If I have an Arch Linux based machine, then it will detect whether Pacman is available as a package manager, and it will run those updates. If you have a Debian based thing, then it will run the apt and the apt-get commands to run updates, but also the clean and the remove and the purge and everything, so that it will actually make sure it's a sustainable command you can run for years in a row, and it won't accumulate temporary files and things that you don't want to you want to get rid of in time. When you're using snap, don't like to, but I have to. When you're using brew, and this is a command that works again for both Linux and Mac, I use NVM as the Node version manager to maintain different versions of Node. I never install Node.js directly. I can actually show you this. Node version manager. There is a Node version manager package available, which you can use to, you can simply install it with this kind of thing. This is a lifesaver. I never use Node.js directly, and I want to always be by default have the latest long-term support LTS version available in my terminal. And every time I run my updates, it will install the LTS. If it isn't there yet, it will set the LTS as the default, and it will use the default. That is, it's very nice to have this kind of thing available, so that Node.js releases quite often, and I run quite a lot of Node.js projects locally. So every time I start a new project, I don't want to be thinking about, am I using the latest version or whatever? No, I would just want to have it. Let's look at it. I have, for example, in one of the projects I'm working on, when I have a .nvmrc file, it will detect that and it will specify, like, hey, you're not using the right version. So how does this work? My prompt already detects what version of Node I have, which is simply, if there is a package.json and a Node modules folder, then it assumes you have Node. So this is a Node.js project, therefore I can show which version I'm running. So it just runs this command. My prompt literally just does this. I have this prompt node function, and that will be run as part of it. So there's a prompt node in the PS1 variable. If you want to start doing this kind of thing yourself. So it just detects, do you have Node available? Then it grabs the version. If there's a package.json, then it figures out, do you have an nvmrc file? And is that the same thing? If it's not the same, then it will make it red, and otherwise it will, let me show you how it works. So right now I'm using the latest version of Node.js. So I have multiple versions installed here. But the LTS is the one I'm using because I ran my updates recently. So what would happen if I would got one of the older versions? Let's assume this is an older version into .nvmrc. Then my prompt from that moment on will say, this version that you have is not the same as nvmrc. So I will immediately see if the Node.js I've been switched to right now is the right version or not. If I do nvm use, then it will switch to the right version. nvm use just looks into the nvmrc file, which I just created, and it will show you in the contents is this version. If I type nvm use, switch to the version, and now my prompt will not complain anymore. And these kind of things, if you manage multiple different projects, just save me a whole bunch of bugs and consistency and time that I don't want to be thinking about these things. Now back to updates. There's other things my update script does. It makes sure you have the latest version of npm by just running this command all the time, and it updates all the global packages that you have. I use Racket as well as a language, and Rust as well. I want the packages to be installed that are installed. I want them to be updated as well. So this update script just detects all the package managers that I use, and it's very easy for me to add one of these things because the run if exists function that I've created in this bash script just will check, does pacman exist? This is the first argument to the function. If yes, then run this command. And this is really all there is. This is a super simple bash function that will allow me to create this script and maintain it very easily. It's not that much code, and it removes the pain from keeping all these different machines with different package managers up to date at all times. The one other thing I wanted to show you is stmux. So that's the simple terminal multiplexer. This is a new rewrite in JavaScript in the Node.js NPM community of the tmux tool. So tmux used to exist already, it still exists. It is a terminal multiplexer. It exists for Linux and Unix. It is a somewhat older tool that is more difficult to configure, and this is a simple version. It supports a subset of features and it has slightly different things here and there, but it's a more modern implementation. I like it a lot because it integrates so well with Node.js. You can just have this package.json script or somewhere. So what does it do? It basically allows you to create multiple windows and panes within your terminal, and then you have some shortcuts available. You can even use mouse mode if you want to click on these things and use scrolling. That is all supported here, and it is a scripted version of that. So if you have a project, and I have a lot of them, where I want to run my npm run dev and my npm test and my test watcher, and I also have Cypress tests, so these are my unit tests, these are my component tests or whatever. So I actually run multiple terminals per project, and this is quite common nowadays. So why not have them next to each other? And when you have them next to each other, why every morning, again in the automation mindset, have this setup routine of 5 to 10 minutes where you open up multiple terminals, where you run different commands? Why not automate this kind of thing? stmux is the automation of that kind of thing. So let me show you. I have a project, the exercise helper, that I've been working on, and it has, as one of the npm run scripts, it has the stmux script that I have npm, so npx. So this is the command it will run. It will run stmux, then there are some arguments, I'll explain what it is, and it will create 3 windows. This is a React Vite project. So one of them is just Vite, like run the watcher, run the local dev server, that kind of thing. I also run my tests, and I run Cypress for the component test. And there's already some things in here. So I want this window to be 1/3 wide, and I want Cypress open also to be 1/3 wide. These are dots that are vertical from each other. So Vite test and Cypress open will be on top of each other. And Vite and this other thing, the combination of these two things, are 2 dots horizontally aligned, so they are next to each other. Now, if I run npm run dev, then it will run this stmux command for me, and there we go, 3 windows. I don't want Cypress right now, but I have my tests here, and I can send it commands, so I can have my mouse mode on, so I can scroll through these windows. There's nothing to scroll right now, but imagine I'm failing a test and I have multiple lines in here. I could press Ctrl A, which is the default modifier, and then a question mark, then I can see the global keys. One feature that I use often is the zoom function, so Ctrl A Z allows me to zoom if I have a smaller font, which I would usually have, but not because I'm recording a YouTube video right now. Then this would be would contain a lot more information. If failing tests, you would get stack traces in here and whatnot, and you would be able to scroll in it, and then with, again, Ctrl A Z, you would be back in the overview. If there's TypeScript errors, then I get them in this window, which again I can sometimes zoom to if I need to look at that, but of course I prefer them in my IDE so that I have them directly. Cypress sometimes gives errors. There's other things I do with this, but this is the basic example. Sometimes you have a lot more code and you can configure this as you want. So this window on the left, I want it to be wider, or I want it to be zoomed in by default. And there's all kinds of things that you can do that just creates consistency across your team. If you all are opening these terminals all the time and it's taking you a lot of time and you're all doing things differently, it just creates friction and it creates more mind-numbing work. So it's quite easy to remove that with a tool like this. I highly recommend it. To summarize, use the automation mindset to remove friction across the board for all the activities that are repetitive, things you're doing all the time, things you don't need to be thinking about, things you need to sync across multiple people in the team. Why wouldn't you use the same terminal setup? Yes, of course, you can have these standards differently per person, but it actually would speed you up, I would argue. So if you need to daily start a bunch of Docker containers, then navigate to 3 different folders and run the npm start command in those folders, or first do a git pull or whatever. If you are syncing up repos and you're not using a mono repo structure and you need to pull on all the different repos, why not write a script for that kind of thing? It really would make your life easier. One last recommendation, I want to mention that I'm not getting paid for this. Wes Bos has a very nice command line power user video course. It's free nowadays. I think it used to cost money, but it's free, which you can take a shortcut this way by learning all these different things that I have taught myself over all the years. You can learn them it has 11 videos and you get them instantly. And it uses Z shell instead of bash, but it's a really nice course to get through all this automation mindset again in an indirect way, because you're learning the features, you're not learning the mindset, but having the mindset on one hand and then having the features at your fingertips, the knowledge that you'll be able to execute, it will make you a lot faster. And that's it. I hope you liked it. If you have any thoughts or if you have a request for a specific video in the future, please let me know in the comments and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.